We are live. We'll wait for some people to trickle in. Bruins lose 3-2 late in game 2 on an Austin Matthews goal. It was 2-2 for most of the game, or most of the third, coming out of the second. And, just wasn't – first of all, I knew this game was over when the Monday crowd was not as good as the Saturday night crowd. It was not as loud in here. Obviously, which makes sense, right? 8 p.m. game on a Saturday versus 7 p.m. start on a Monday. I get that. But Bruins lose. As people start to come in here, Carl, just sort of what were your general thoughts to start this game?
Yeah, general thoughts for me. I have 2 shout-outs if I can, Evan, before we start. Can I do
Please
that?
do.
Oh, yeah.
Shout everybody out.
Oh, no. Huge shout-out to the St. Mark's varsity baseball squad for an 11-4 victory over Governors Academy. This leads to the second shout-out. So I missed the first half of the first period because I was coming from – I am the assistant coach. I sit on the bucket, but a big win. But because of that, my 7-year-old son took notes for me for the first half of the first period. So he says,
I like it.
Yeah. So Colton says, with great edges, we tried to score. I don't know where that came from. He must have heard it.
That's a hockey mind. That's a future hockey mind. That's better than me.
It is.
Better notes than me.
I think my initial thoughts are opportunity wasted. Why? I think if the Bruins lose this series, they're going to look back at this game because this is the second time that one of the best players in the National Hockey League was non-existent. Like Mitch Marner was nowhere to be found in this game. And Austin Matthews was great, but I would have assumed in a game where Toronto needed to win, Mitch Marner would have been unbelievable, and he wasn't. And Toronto was still able to win. Like that scares me. Number 2, initial thoughts. Toronto made a lot of adjustments, both on their forecheck and then breaking out. And Boston didn't make one adjustment, not one in-game adjustment. And that was a little frightening as a Bruins fan, that they just didn't adjust to what Toronto did all game. And Toronto played with more urgency and deserved to win the game tonight.
They did. And I think that was the big thing. The first part you hit on, Marner, it's funny. They put Marner up. Sheldon Keefe put Marner up with Matthews and Domi, I think, for a little bit of that second period, maybe to try to get him going. Didn't really work. I mean, you're right. Like, you don't notice Marner out there, which is, surprising given how good he is. And I think you're right. Just, in a game like this, when a guy's invisible like that, you have to capitalize on it. I see a commenter says it's over. I don't think we're there yet. We're not in that territory yet. But to the second part of your thing, I agree. Bruins are the passive forecheck as they did in game 1, and it worked in game 1. It's funny. So you missed at the beginning of the game, the first minute, the Bruins forced like 3 turnovers on the forecheck, just kind of sitting back, letting the Maple Leafs defensemen make decisions. And after that, Maple Leafs sort of figured it out. And the Bruins just didn't do enough to counter that. And, we said after game 1, and I said it, like, the Maple Leafs D just are not good enough moving the puck. I don't know how that gets fixed. And they seem to fix it. I mean, it wasn't as big of an issue tonight. And I'm curious what you saw adjustment-wise that they did so well.
Yeah, so at the end of one of the conversations that we had after game 1 was, what are the adjustments that Toronto needs to make on their breakout? Right? Like you want their defensemen to limit the touches that they have on the puck. And that's what they did. We said that in order to break Boston's forecheck, that they were going to have to come out the weak side, right? Like a little touch pass off the boards, D-to-D partner, and then get north right away. And that's what they did tonight, right? Like they limited the touches, they went weak side, and then they started hitting those stretch passes, not allowing, right? Like, and I don't know if this is Sheldon Keefe or their coach is saying, hey, don't try to skate up the ice. Just hit the stretch pass and we'll live in transition. We'll play with some sort of pace. And that's what Toronto did tonight. They went out the weak side. They stretched their strong side forward and then started hitting them at the far blue line. And what that does is that pulls Boston's defense out of the offensive zone, right? Like even if the Bruins are capable of turning the puck over, there's no one there's no one there on the strong side to play with. So it's twofold. Well, maybe it's threefold. Like limit the touches of Toronto's defense, right? Like pull out Boston defense as well, and then Toronto gets to do what they do best, and that is play in transition, play fast, and it worked tonight. And that was just a surprising thing because they did that, and at the intermission on Nesson, not that you could see it, but that's what they were talking about. Like the Bruins need to make some sort of adjustment to the stretch pass, and they didn't do that at all. Not once in that game did they make an adjustment. And you could even say that high lob that Domi gives to Austin Matthews, that's a stretch pass, right? And DeBrus doesn't go at him with any sort of pace. He doesn't get a stick out, and right, it's in the back of the net. So yeah, that was the adjustment that Toronto made to hit those stretch passes, and Bruins didn't make any adjustment on their forecheck at all.
No, and I thought Toronto's defense was better tonight in their own zone. I thought that their team defense was a little better. I mean, their team defense was awful on that Pavel Zacha to David Pastrnak goal. No, Jake McCabe is up above the dots. There's 13 seconds left. How do you not have guys lower in the zone? But after that, the Maple Leafs defense tightened up. The Bruins just really couldn't get any 5-on-5 offense generated at all tonight. Like, that was Zacha behind the back pass was sweet, but that was their one really good 5-on-5 look. The only other one was that Marchand play in like midway through the third period on that odd man rush. That was really, because I was saying to you, like, we'll get into the goaltending in a second, but like, I can count on one hand the number of prime 5-on-5 chances the Bruins had tonight. Felt like the Maple Leafs had a lot more. And again, we can get into the Bruins side of the ice, but on the Leafs side of the ice, like they sort of took care of business. I thought they were all right. They were a little bit cleaner, except for that one goal, except for that Zacha goal, Pastrnak goal.
Can I ask you a question?
Please do.
All right. So you say that Toronto cleaned up their own end.
Not cleaned up. I cleaned up as maybe a little bit too much.
No. Is it true, or did Boston not create enough turnovers off their forecheck and force Toronto to play 5-on-5? Like I don't ever remember, right? Like I think Toronto, what they cleaned up was their breakouts were much better tonight. They came in with a game plan. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to break this. And Boston didn't put enough pressure on their D to force turnovers. So Toronto didn't have to defend 5-on-5 tonight.
No, they didn't. You're right. You're 100% right. You're right.
Oh,
you're right.
Wow.
You win.
That was easy.
I'll give it to you. But at the same time, though, right? Like when the Bruins when they did have sustained pressure in the offensive zone, the few times they did, I thought Toronto was a little bit cleaner. Not perfect.
Yeah,
Again, I go back to that Pastrnak. I don't know how you don't have a guy below the dot, more than one guy below the dots in that situation. That makes no sense to me. They were a little bit better. Samsonov was better. He makes that big save on Marchand. He did what he had to do. I didn't think it was the hardest game for him, but he showed up. As we're talking about goalies, why don't we talk about the other, Linus Ullmark? There was a lot of debate, obviously, going into this game. Who's going to start? Ullmark, Swayman. They keep it with the rotation. You said it after game one. If they're going to go to Ullmark at some point, it's got to be tonight. They went with Ullmark. I don't think he was the problem. I don't think we'll look back at game two and say, man, if only they started Swayman. Like, I think Ullmark was great. He made a number of key stops on the power play and at 5-on-5. So to me, like, I don't think we're going to, if the Bruins lose this series, it won't be because they started Linus Ullmark in game two. If anything, it kept the game closer.
Yeah, he's certainly not the problem. The only thing that as you go forward in the series, now you've got to stick with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, at no point are you going to say, like, Swayman was as good as it got in game one, 35 saves on 36 shots. He doesn't go game two. Now, Linus Ullmark, not the issue with your game tonight at all. Like, he kept you in it, absolutely, 100%. Or like maybe you'd want Tavares's power play goal back, but right, like the save on Robertson late there in the third, he was great. The only thing now is you've got to alternate every game. You have to, because you've made it clear to everyone in your dressing room between those two goalies, regardless of regardless of how you play, we are going to go with the tandem the whole way through this playoffs. That's what,
is it guaranteed? Like, okay, let's say, all right, let's play out the rest of the series for fun, right? Let's say let's say they go to a game 7, right? And they go Swayman in game 3, Olmark in game 4. Let's say the Bruins lose the next game, then they win game 4 with Olmark, and they're going back and forth. Can't you start whoever gives you the best chance to win in game 7? You can do 2 in a row. I don't think they're stuck doing it every other game. I think they are definitely locked into Swayman going in game 3. No doubt about that. But once you start getting into like elimination territory, I think you're starting the best guy. I don't know. I think you're riding with the hot hand when it comes to elimination time.
How are you allowing someone to get the hot hand if you're going every other to start? Like, that's why I would have gone with Swayman tonight. And again, Linus Ullmark, not the problem. I would have gone to allow one guy to get hot, right? Like 35 of 36 saves. He goes back in the net. If he stung tonight, and maybe even if you lost this 3-2 game and he wasn't the problem, maybe you're like, all right, I can go to Linus Ullmark. I don't know.
I was with you. I thought they should have started Swayman coming into this game, but as I said to you also on that post-game show, I don't hate the move to go to Ullmark. I don't hate the move sticking with the tandem. Like, it's 1-1 right now in this series. I don't think I think Swayman definitely kept them in game 1. I think Ullmark was good in game 2. I don't think it's 1-1 in the series because the tandem's hurting them. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying, like,
I'm not saying that.
We're here because we're not here because that. In terms of getting hot, I mean, look, I think I think it goes with who's playing better over those. Like, okay, let's say it goes to a game 7. So they play. They each play. They play 3 games in the series. I think you go off who's played better in those 3 games. Whether it's the next guy in the rotation or whether it's the guy who started game 6. What do you have?
I'm going full St. Mark's here. This is a teacher in me. I'm going to raise my hand, Evan.
I'm calling on you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. If we split, how do I get hot?
I just think whoever's playing better, whoever had a better course of 3 games. I like, to me, you have 1 game, it's do or die. You're going with the guy who's statistically better over the 3 games that they played. Okay. Or if you want to get crazy, like, you go with the tandem for the first 4 games, right? You do 2 and 2, and you see where you're at after, because you can't get eliminated, obviously, now in game 4, or they can't get eliminated.
Yeah.
So then in games 5, 6, and 7, maybe you readjust. But again, you're right in the sense that they've got to stick with it for the next couple games. I don't know if they need to stick with it. I think once you get into elimination territory, you go back to kind of, all right, you gotta go with the guy you believe in more at the moment instead of just the rotation. But that's for game 6 and 7. I think that's where they're at
for game 6 and 7.
Yes, I think once you get into that territory, if you're down 3-2 in the series or you're tied 3-3, then you gotta get into that. We'll go back to goaltending at some point, because how can you not?
Yeah.
One thing I think really hurt the Bruins tonight, and I see it mentioned a little bit in the comments, Andrew Peeke going down in the second, I thought hurt them. Forced Kevin Shattenkirk to play some more minutes that he normally wouldn't have. They actually scored on the PK that Kevin Shattenkirk was out there for. That was John Tavares' goal to make it 2-2. I haven't gotten a chance to look at Twitter. Actually, you know what? Ty Anderson tweeted that there's no update on Andrew Peeke. So, again, I don't know what the deal was. I know you said, I didn't see this. I'm in the building. You said it was a shot block that Nesson was showing.
So Nesson had showed that his last shift was 6:47 left in the second period. It was on a penalty kill. Him out front of the net, blocking shot, but he was engaged in a net front battle. Kind of looks like feet kind of pulled out a little bit wide. I'm not going to speculate on what it was, but that was his last shift of the game. So, yeah, I never would have thought that losing Andrew Peeke would have been a main contributor to, and I don't want to say it's a main contributor to the loss, but it forces other guys to play more minutes than they typically would have. And probably in situations that they wouldn't have played in. So, yeah, I don't think even Kevin Shattenkirk picking up extra minutes was all that bad. I think Lindholm had a problem tonight. I think consistently on breakouts, he was for the first goal on Domi's goal, turning over the puck right up the glass. I think he had a hard evening, and he's someone that you rely on to eat up minutes against top lines, and he's someone that through the first 2 games, he's got to be better in order for the Bruins to win the series.
Yeah, I think he had a rough first period. Talking about Lindholm, I think he had a rough first period. I mean, he gave away on that on Toronto's first goal, and then, I think, Toronto was their aggressive forecheck did a little bit more damage. I think that the Bruins were a little bit better moving the puck in game one, even though Toronto was still pretty aggressive on that forecheck. But I like some of their puck moving woes hit them, and then as you mentioned, like Shattenkirk having to go into other roles, I think hurts, because that's a kind of a guy who's more of a power play specialist, different matchups. And I think Andrew Peeke is I said this to you after game one, is sort of like your secondary shutdown defenseman. Like Andrew Peeke is sort of he's good at shutting, like we mentioned, if Nylander was playing, right? He'd probably be tasked with Nylander. And I think he could handle it. I think he'd be okay at that. So again, I don't know what's gonna happen in these next couple of games with Andrew Peeke.
So who slots in there? Because Nylander skated today with the scratches, so he skates. He's obviously preparing to play. Any additional days off can only help him. So when you win, and I'm going to imagine at some point in the series he plays, you're going to get a better Mitch Marner. You just are.
Yep.
And you're going to get
especially in Toronto.
In Toronto, where you have matchups. It worries me what they're going to put out on the back end, and when Toronto can get whatever matchup they want. I think you look at today, and I know we were talking this right before we went on live. Toronto scoring chances 27-12 against Boston today.
Yep,
that's a lot. 9-2 in the third period. So you saw Montgomery talk about like the sense of urgency was a big problem why they didn't win this game. There was no real.
Oh my God. Continue.
No, there was no real push. There was no real pushback from Boston. Toronto was desperate to create chances in that third period. And all that, down Nylander, down Marner, and not having last change. They dominated that third period, and that's going to be a huge boost for Toronto going back home. Obviously, we don't know if Nylander is going to play, but I guarantee you Mitch Marner is too good to go 3 games playing as poorly as he has the first 2.
He is. By the way, as they drill at the TD Garden Ice, it's a good example. It's a good time to hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks.
Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks, as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level during basketball and hockey's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a huge selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with the Celtics season in full swing, there's plenty of opportunities to participate in Prize Picks. This week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Jason Tatum for more than 30 points, Kristaps Porzingis for more than 2 blocks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And now let's get back to the show.
So, Carl, there's a lot of people in the comment section going after Matt Grzelcyk, and I think there are some criticisms to be had just during his time here. I thought Lindholm was way worse, especially tonight. I don't think Grzelcyk was the huge issue tonight. I know there were some penalties that went on Tavares. Wasn't great. That was kind of blatant. But to me, Lindholm had the worst game. And I'm not trying to say who was worse, but I think Lindholm tonight was worse, and I'm fine with Grzelcyk. You mentioned adjustments if Peak is out. I think Wotherspoon comes in. To me, that's the big thing. You might have said that when someone was coming by zoned out, but I would go with Parker Wotherspoon. I think, just in terms of I think he can be a shutdown guy, and I would rather him in game 3, just based on matchups.
Do you have another option? And I'm not being sarcastic.
No, you really don't. Because
yeah.
I mean, do you bring Lowry up? You're not really looking for that. You're not looking. You don't need an offensive. You need his size. Spark. You don't need the offensive spark. You have Shattenkirk. That's why Shattenkirk's in the lineup. To me, it's more and I think it was obvious tonight when Peak leaves the lineup. Peak is a good shutdown guy. You lose that shutdown presence, so you want to bring it back with Wotherspoon. So, are there many other options? No, but I do think Wotherspoon is a good choice, at least for what you got.
I think you're probably gonna have to shorten it a little bit, and I know it's hard in the playoffs, but in order to get a matchup in Toronto, you're gonna probably have to make sure that McAvoy and I thought Carlo was really good. Carlo was physical tonight.
Yep.
Did a great job of closing below goal line, finishing. So you're going to need to make sure that those McAvoy and Carlo are on the ice as much as you can. And that's why you'd love if Lindholm can be the player that he's capable of being in this series, because you're going to need those guys to play probably 25 plus minutes in Toronto.
Yeah, this commenter makes an interesting point about Marchand and Pastrnak, and there haven't been a ton of chances for them. I'm looking at, I'm looking at the lines of their stats tonight. I mean, Marchand was outchanced 11-12, which again you'd expect a little bit more, and then Pastrnak outchanced that line outchanced 8-10. So the Leafs have done pretty good at kind of limiting those guys at 5-on-5. And I think the difference maker in game 1 was the bottom 6. Difference maker in game 2 was the bottom 6, but a different bottom 6. I thought Toronto's bottom 6 was great. I thought Toronto's bottom 6 was really good tonight. That fourth line with Reeves and Camp, I thought did their job well. They had some long ozone sequences. I thought their third line was pretty good. To me, I think they beat you in the bottom 6 tonight. That was another area where I think Toronto had the major advantage.
Yeah, I just think that they were more aggressive, that bottom 6 for Toronto. I think their forecheck allowed them to do what they do best, which is that F1 be a little bit more aggressive, finish their hits, and they were in and around the net every chance they could, right? And I think that's what, right, we talked about that the other day. That's what Ryan Reeves brings to the lineup. He may not have the ability to make plays with the puck, but he's always first in on the forecheck. He always finishes his hits. He's always there to support his teammates. So yeah, that bottom 6 did a nice job for them. So, but the series is going to come down to Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand. Can those guys can they make enough plays to win the game for you? And Austin Matthews was a difference maker tonight. He was the reason why Toronto won the game. In the faceoff circle, what was he, 70% tonight?
To me, along with that goal he scored, I think his biggest play was saving a goal. That net front scramble towards the end of the third period, he jumps behind Samsonov and knocks the puck back under him. Matthews came to play. Matthews, that was a really strong game out of him. He had some other scoring chances that Omar made nice saves on. So, again, I agree with you. But again, secondary scoring, and I know you're not. I know you know it matters, but like it matters, and I think it's just those momentum swings do so much. And the Bruins were good at that in game one, and then the Leafs were much better at that in game two.
Well, secondary scoring means so much because when a coach is going through a game plan, you do so much to try to shut down, right? Matthews, Marner, the same thing. Toronto's focusing on Pastrnak, Marchand. You focus on those lines so much and those matchups, really getting out the right D pair, getting out the right forward line to play against them, that you don't focus so much on third and fourth line guys and what the matchup. Yep. You're essentially looking for those lines to play even hockey. So anytime you chip in, that's great. And yeah, I think in game one, Boston's bottom six played better, and tonight Toronto's played better for them. So kudos to them.
Yeah. Credit to Jeffrey here for realizing that we're reasonable. We're reasonable. It's a good way to put it. We're reasonable. That's all you can ask for, right? Just reasonable. It's interesting. It's 1-1 now. Nobody had Bruins or Leafs in 4, so it's okay. It's one loss. Just like we said after game one, it's one win. Game ones are game ones. They're not the most important game of the series. Do you feel differently after tonight at the Bruins' chances or the Leafs' chances in this series?
God, I'm trying to think about it so that for Jeff I can be practical here. I think gosh, you're putting me into a scenario where I'm thinking last year too.
I know. I'll go. You know what? I'll jump on this one first.
Okay.
I'm not feeling differently. Credit to the Leafs for making those breakout adjustments, being better and moving the puck out of their own zone. They capitalized on a breakaway chance, but we knew this was going to be a tight series. And the first game wasn't that tight. Second game was. Leafs came out. I mean, I don't mean to like shoo it off, but like we expected this to be a close series. I think the Bruins will they should make necessary adjustments going into game 3. We know it's the tandem in net. I don't feel super differently. It's not like the Leafs came in here over 2 games and blew the Bruins off the ice. And it's not like the Bruins came out in game 2 and dominated the Leafs. The Leafs outshot the Bruins both nights, but that's because the Bruins try to go for those more high danger chances. Again, the Leafs had more high danger chances, but they also have better guys up front. So to me, I don't feel super differently after. I'm not leaning one. I still have Bruins in 6. I still think that happens. I'd have no reason to change from that. I don't think we've seen enough to really divvy from that.
27-12 in scoring chances is that getting outplayed?
Well, yeah. Yes.
And that doesn't. No, go ahead.
The Leafs were a much better team tonight, but the Bruins are also the better team in game 1, I thought. So again, you have two, these teams are close. My point is, I'm not changing off of this series hasn't drastically changed. It's a close series, and I think it's just going to continue to be that.
Did you freeze, Evan? Oh man, I think for me the one thing that is changed. I think we went into the series thinking that the Bruins had a bigger advantage on defense, and I think I bought into that. And having watched the first 2 games and watched the struggles on the back end of Hampus Lindholm and Kevin Shattenkirk and Matt Grzelcyk, I think that's the one thing that's changed in my estimation. Right, the definitive for me going into the series, the definitive advantage the Bruins had was in net and on defense, and obviously more high-end talent on Toronto's side at forward. I think as it's played out through the first 2 games, that advantage on defense, that gap has closed. And tonight, the adjustments that Toronto made, those are going to play out through the rest of the whole series. You're going to, right, like Toronto's coaching staff is going to limit the touches of the defense get. They're going to hit the stretch pass and try to play to their advantage, which is speed for the neutral zone, make plays and
odd man rushes.
Yeah, and I guess yes. So I think we went into the series thinking that it's going to be close. I am going to go. It's going to go Game 7. I guess that's only a game difference, and I'm going to hope that Boston is smart enough to make the adjustments that they need to make to win the series. I think that I do think that they're a more urgent team. I think they defend harder, but Toronto, at least for tonight, made the adjustments that they needed to make to limit the time that they spent in their defensive end, and Boston didn't do that. And it was just odd to me that the Bruins weren't able to make that adjustment at any point during the course of the game to swing momentum their way, which was to put more pressure on their D, to play 5-on-5, to play below the dots, to go low to high. That just never happened in the game, and that was perplexing to me, and I don't know why I'm so perplexed tonight by that showing by the Bruins.
Okay, so you're right. The Leafs are going to continue to limit their touches for the defensemen. That makes sense. I mean, they don't have the best puck moving crew back there. They don't have Erik Karlsson and guys like that. But like for Boston, I don't want to make this sound easy, but like in your eyes, do you go more aggressive forecheck? Do you try to make those defensemen make split-second decisions instead of giving them enough time to hit that stretch pass? Do you come up further? Do you come up closer in the neutral zone to try to take away? To try to cut those passes off? Like, what would you do to limit that? What would work in that situation?
Yeah, so I wouldn't come up in the neutral zone. So what you're trying to do is create the turnover below the goal line. So I would still have your F1 has got to be more aggressive. That's an inside-out path, and then your second forechecker has got to identify who the defenseman is and already seek them out before, right? Like them going out the weak side today or making a reverse pass to then hit the stretch. They've got to identify who that player is and have their second forechecker there prior to puck making, getting on their stick. So it would be more of an aggressive 2-on-2 forecheck as opposed to putting defensemen up in the neutral zone, because you want the defenseman for, and like I always say to our kids, and I'll ask you, Evan, having been a Framingham High legend, right?
I don't know about that, but sure.
Okay, but are you a better player if you have time and space?
Of course.
Yeah. You are, yes. So these are national.
Even me.
So these are National Hockey League defensemen. Regardless of what we think of them, these are the best 180 defensemen in the world, 192 defensemen in the world. They can make plays. Anyone can make plays if they have time and space. I think it worked the other day trying to make them pass through traffic, but the adjustment that they made today was, all right, we're going to hit the stretch. They can make those passes. You've got to get right up on them right away and make them make that pass under duress, and they didn't do that this evening.
The Leafs did a little bit of that, I thought, in the Bruins end of making the Bruins defensemen make quick decisions and not give. Again, they didn't give them time and space. I think it led to, it was Toronto's first goal that Lindholm tried to throw up around the boards. It got picked off, went to the middle, and Toronto scored off of it. So like maybe a little bit more of that. In games 3 and 4, at least in game 3.
I wouldn't go with what Toronto did for the Bruins. So what Toronto did there, if you remember the last game, they did what is a 1-2-2 flood. And sorry to get really boring and technical here. So their first
it's late, remember. Don't put people to sleep. But I know what you mean.
I won't. I'll be quick. They went inside out with their first forechecker, and anytime contact was made, 2 and 3 came down. 2 and 3 flooded to one side, so that's puck side, and they came down low. And that was the expectation what Boston thought tonight that they were going to get. So they were expecting contact, and they were expecting everyone else to come down lower. That way, if they rimmed it, in reality, who should be there is Boston's winger.
Yep.
Toronto pulled back a little bit. They weren't as aggressive with their strong side pinches, although they do an unbelievable job at holding the offensive blue line with their defensemen. And they took away those rims.
They love to pinch. They love to
pinch on everything. And today they backed off with F2 and F3, and they were taking away the walls. And once they got it off the wall, they were going right to the net. They were attacking the net. So, I mean, that was Toronto's adjustment on their forecheck, and Boston wasn't ready for it. So,
no, they weren't. And again, like, I think it also goes back to, like, you know, we talked about the advantages both teams have. And for the Bruins, you want to limit those odd man rushes that Toronto gets. For Toronto, I think you're okay with Boston potentially getting an odd man rush. Like, at least that's what it seemed like in game one. But tonight, I mean, they just did a good job of closing off those breakouts, not letting the Bruins really exit their zone cleanly. So again, I Toronto did what they had to do. We can get into some other stuff here. I think it's interesting. You know who the physicality in the series ramped up, not physicality, but the skirmishes, right? You have Coyle and Labushkin. You know, you have it's funny, I thought the Leafs were doomed in this game when Jake McCabe took that cross-checking penalty early. Like, I was like, all right, like, Sheldon Keefe comes out after game one, says his team needs to be more disciplined, like, right off the bat. They're undisciplined, and then the Bruins scored. So that was shocking. At that point, I was like, oh, Bruins have this in the, at least felt like it had it in the bag, and then just kind of went away.
In all transparency, I don't want that being called in the playoffs. But I think Lauko sells that a little bit. I think that was early on statement by the referee saying, hey, we're not going to put up with any of the after whistle stuff at all. Everyone remain calm here tonight. Like, that was a little soft of a call, but to the Bruins' credit, I mean, that took them no time to put that in the back of the net, and that's kind of what Toronto is. And if you can force them to defend, if you get them on the power play, I mean, if you remember that's just an exchange on the half wall between Marchand and DeBrusque, and when you exchange, it just confuses the defenders, right? In reality, not National Hockey League defenders. But it confused Toronto tonight, and they went down to Marchand, then who goes backdoor to Geekie. But there's no, like, within that game itself, and we talked about it the other day, no head on a swivel, no active sticks from Toronto. So that's going to need to be an adjustment. And that was what was frustrating about power play, 6 minutes left. And I think a commenter made the suggestion, like, are they outthinking themselves? The idea that you got 6 minutes left and what is a crucial, like, obviously it's a playoff game, so all these games are crucial, and you kind of throw out these mismatched power plays, which had worked, but at that time during the game, I'm putting out my 5 best players, and if I'm going to lose, I'm losing with McAvoy, Pastrnak, Marchand, Zaka, and whatever you want to put out in front of the net, whether that's Coyle or who knows what, but I mean, that was a problem. 6 minutes, and I don't know that you got a shot. It was difficult for you to gain possession of the puck. No urgency in retrievals. That was a moment where I thought the game was over, that there wasn't going to be enough pushback. Like, you had an opportunity on a power play where 2 guys get called out of a scrum, essentially, which never happens, right? Or you had 3. You had Coyle, Labushkin, and Bertuzzi. That never happens in a National Hockey League game, that you have 3 guys in that instance get it. And there was perfect opportunity to take advantage of that. And they didn't even create momentum coming out of that.
I was going to say, one of their issues all season has been those zone entries on the power play. And tonight, it like on that one you're talking about with like 6 minutes left, there's just no ability to enter the zone. So again, that was their chance. They had a chance afterwards, and I think that scrum in front of the net was after that power play, if memory serves. So they did have that, but again, like, got to convert there. And I agree with you. Your 5 best players should be on the ice in that situation. I'm fine with, if they want to have a power play in the first, second period, I'm fine with them doing the 2 units and having different different power players on each. I'm fine with that. But you're right. In a tie, when you're down a goal with 6 minutes left in the playoffs, maybe that it should be more of the focus.
Yeah, I think in the flow of the game in the first two periods, you take a look at it, and you had touched on it the other day. Essentially, it's lines going out with one another, and it becomes difficult to manage that as the game's going on. But with 6 minutes left, you have a timeout at your disposal. All right, like get your 5 best players out there, and if it doesn't work in the first minute, take your timeout and then send them right back out there again. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. Let's revisit the goaltending because there's more people in here. So we'll revisit the goaltending. Bruins go to Ullmark in game 2. I think most people felt like they were going to go right back to Swayman. I think the biggest thing is I don't know if we're going to second guess the decision. Now, you made a very interesting point, though, in that we may not necessarily question the game 2 decision, but we may in the context of game 2. But if things play out not in the Bruins' favor, we may question it in the sense of using the rotation, right? Like we might say after game 4, if Ullmark has a stinker in game 4, let's say, we might say, why are they doing this? Why not just stick with Swayman? Which is valid, which is then, as I said earlier, when you could say, hey, we're just going to stick with Swayman for the rest of the series. Like, I think that's in that case, you go more towards Swayman and you sort of use the first 4 games as I don't want to say test, but like you test the rotation out, you see what you can get out of it. But I mean, I don't know. Ullmark had a great game tonight. I thought Ullmark played really well.
Yeah, he played well. I just think I'll keep going back to the idea that you need to allow someone to get hot. And that doesn't mean that each one of the goalies wasn't going to play in the series. That may have been the case. But I think at this point in the season, you're saying to everyone, you're not sure who the guy is, that we're going to continually run out our tandem. And the one thing that I don't think people think about, and I'm not saying this is the case. Like I'm not a goalie guru. I can't break down their games.
Every goalie guru thinks they got to stick with one.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying that.
Every goalie guru.
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you play differently in front of different goalies. Like that's a reality. And some of that's confidence. Some of that is to adjust to their strengths and or weaknesses. And now this is where I can't break down. There are far smarter people than me out there that can break down Ullmark and Swayman's game, but sometimes you adjust a penalty kill to play to someone's strengths. And that's why like that consistency of play. And that might not be the case for the Bruins. They might just like they just may go out and do their thing. And
well, they are used to the tandem. That is one thing. They're used to it.
I personally don't like it. That's me.
No, and I get that. And I don't think it's we said this after game 1. They've done it the whole year. It worked. It got them to this point, right? Do they need someone to get hot? Is the thing, right? Like every playoff series, obviously, every Stanley Cup champion ever, almost every Stanley Cup champion has had their goalie get really hot, of course, right? But this is sort of a different situation. We haven't really seen this where a team has 2 like top 10 goalies in the top 10 caliber goalies in the NHL, right? Like, and we said this at the trade deadline. If you're going to keep both guys, you might as well use them, or at least go for it using them. That's their biggest strength. And I agree with you. Like, if they missed, if at the end of the series, if there was an alternative reality, and it said if they used Jeremy Swayman every game, they would have won the series in 6 games or something like that, then obviously, yeah, you regret it. But I don't know. It's gotten them to this point, and I think we saw it with Ullmark last. Like the fear. Let's say the fear is using Swayman every game, and then he runs out of gas like Ullmark did last year in game 4 or 5, and suddenly you're throwing Ullmark into a series at the end of a series when it's been weeks since he's played, right? Like that's the worry. The worry is you run out of gas.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the point here where it's like, you're not throwing a guy into a series late. You're doing the rotation early. And as I said, if after game 4, it's 2-2 and Swayman had 2 good games in games 1 and 3 and Ullmark had, lost both of his games in 2 and 4, then you probably do go with Swayman for games 5, 6, and 7. But I don't know. I mean, through two games though, I'm not second guessing them yet. Is what I'll say. Because I don't know. I mean, the rest of who knows how the rest of the series plays out? But I'm not second guessing them at this point.
Yeah, I would say so. Your point was the tandem got us to this point, and I think everyone would recognize that the regular season and the playoffs are completely different, right?
Yes, of course.
Different style of play. I do understand the point that you're making, though, right? Like, you can't, if things were to work the way they did last year, and whether it was Ullmark running out of steam or that injury, that you can't then just expect, Swayman to come in there in Game 7 and pull it off, having not been adjusted to the series. So I see that point of view. I just think that you would go with one guy until they prove they couldn't do it, and then you have a professional that can step in there and win a game if they have to, and you can go from there. I guess in what Pittsburgh was able to do with Fleury and Matt Murray the one year.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think this is me personally again, and I don't think it's the way to go to continually switch off with them, but
So what you're seeing is and I get what you're saying.
I want consistency. I want consistency. I want everyone going in, and I don't even. And this is the thing for me too, and they may know it. Right, like everyone in that locker room may know, hey, we're just going with, and so that's the information I'm not privy to. I have no idea what the communication is like with that team, but I don't want our guys. I don't want to have to answer the question every game, who's going tomorrow? Who do you think should, right? Like that shouldn't enter their mind. It should just be, it's this person's net until it doesn't work. And all that other thinking portion of it at this time of year is out the window. That's your guy. That's who it is. And we're going to rely on him. And that's the one thing too, regardless of who's played, they've relied on Ullmark and Swayman too much early on. Like that is what will get them to run out of gas if you're consistently making 35 saves a night, right? Like that's got to stop.
Ullmark had 30 tonight. So, yeah. I mean, and a lot of them were from high danger areas. I agree with you. I think it just goes back to how this team's constructed. I've said it to you all year. Like, the reality is that's what this is, right? Like, that's their strength. I mean, again, you can argue if it is or not. If you don't really have a starting goalie, if you have two, do you really have none? But that is the positional. That's the depth chart that you have the deepest. And I also think like last year looms, and we've talked about it enough. But like, not doing it last year and having it be a reason that you did lose to Florida in the first round when Ullmark did run out of gas, he had the injury, like all that stuff. He gives up a bunch of goals in Game 6. He gives the puck away in Game 5. Then you thrust Swayman in there in Game 7. Like I think last year looms large in the sense that like it's sort of what Danny says here. Like it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Make a decision to go down with it. Like. If they win this series, obviously nobody cares. If they lose, we're going to question it and we're going to second guess every, what they did with the goaltending. But like, I think now, as you said after Game 1, if you're going to go with Ullmark if you're going to do the rotation, you've got to put Ullmark in Game 2. And I think that's clearly what they're doing. I think there's no doubt they go back to Swayman in Game 3.
Yeah, I think that they've got to go back that route, and I think you go Ullmark Game 4 regardless of what happens in Game 3. And I'll agree with you at that point. That's when they'll kind of make the decision who they're going to ride for Games 5, 6, and 7. Who's looked the best through 4. The only hope for you going to Toronto is you're not down 3-1, and you're making a decision in Game 5 who's going to save your series. I mean, I do agree with all the people, and I do appreciate everyone tuning in at 10:47 at night. I do agree with everyone. It's not the reason the Bruins lost tonight. They got outplayed by a better team, and Ullmark was really good. Yeah, they've got bigger issues than Ullmark and Swayman for sure.
Oh God, yeah. The issue is not goaltending. Imagine if it was. That would be that would suck. If that
Well,
was the big issues, it'd be over.
yeah,
Series
you'd
done.
be in trouble if that's your big issue.
Yeah, that would be a pretty big one. Going into Game 3, the series now shifts to Toronto. Game 3 Wednesday. Game 4 is until Saturday.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's quite a little break in between. I think the biggest thing the Bruins need, and we can get into the technicalities of how, but you do need your top 6 to produce 5-on-5 more than they have through 2 games. Obviously, there was that Pastrnak goal. Really nice play by Zacha. But that was, if they won, we would be like, holy crap, what a pass. But again, bad D by Toronto in front of their own net and in their own zone. But I think the biggest thing is, your bottom 6. Your top 6, needs to produce. And the other thing is, we've touched on this a lot. You've got to create those chances, right? You've got to find a way to limit Toronto's ability to leave their own zone, because that's a weakness of theirs. You got to find a way to exploit that. So to me, I think those are the 2 big things, and they are intertwined. I have going into Game 3. What do you got?
Yeah, it's I'm going to come back to it, and I've spoken to this ad nauseum. The adjustments that you got to make on the forecheck. What does that look like? Do you put more pressure on Toronto's defense to force them to turn the puck over, and then are you going low to high enough? And what I mean by that is, once you gain possession of the puck off those turnovers, Toronto does not, and they did a fractional better job of closing out on defense. You've got to force them to defend for periods of time, because they can't do it. Right. And if you watch the game tonight, the few opportunities that they had extended zone time, they continually went D to D and had opportunities to attack down the wall. You've got to force Toronto to defend the majority of that game. And if the Bruins can do that, they'll win the series easily. If they don't force turnovers and they allow Toronto to play in transition, that's a recipe for success for Toronto. Like, they want that to happen. And then on the other side, it's how do you transition out of your own zone smoother than they did tonight? Like, that was a problem for them. Turnovers, Lindholm with the big one that sticks out in my mind, but it was McAvoy, it was Grizzlies, it was everyone, right? Like, it was clear that was a game planner there. A game planner there was just chip pucks up off the wall. So I think forcing turnovers and then limiting yours on your own breakouts, that's going to be a big thing. The only thing the atmosphere in Toronto would be electric for the first 10 periods. And how do you manage that? Right? Like, how do you manage Toronto's going to finish all their hits for the first 10 minutes? Can you come out of that 0-0, and then the game will be, everyone be on a level playing field? I always worry about the first 10 minutes in a playoff series at opposing teams' home rink.
100%. And if I'm the Bruins, I'm really worried. Someone just mentioned it about William Nylander returning. I think that changes the dynamic, changes matchups. Do they put him up on the second line? Do they put him back on the third? I think that changes things. In terms of people coming back for the Bruins, I know Derek Forbert's well ahead of schedule. I don't think you'll see him in this series unless, like, it gets bad. Like, unless the Bruins are really on the ropes, just given what he's coming back from. But, like, Brazeau, if he could come back in this series, would be a nice addition. I don't know who you're moving out, because I like the speed that Boquist and Beecher bring with Maroon. But I think if Brazeau can come back and you need it, like, you need a change, does he come in on the third line? Like, that's the other thing. Like, I've liked Lauko's game. I've liked what Lauko has brought. But does that continue, right? If things change with him over games 3 and 4, do you suddenly put Frederick Geekie and Brazeau together? Again, I'm only talking in terms of, like, if things do not go well in games 3 and 4, then you look at these things. I'm not saying necessarily for game 3. I don't even know. I don't think Brazeau is really even available yet. Isn't, or else he'll probably be in the lineup. So I think those are sort of some of the things that they need to do and that they need to change.
Yeah, I think it would be hard to put Forbort in. Like, if you expected a lot of penalties and you need someone to block shots, he'd be out there consistent, right? Like, consistent.
Yes. I mean, he just came back from a conditioning loan. That's just coming back from injury. I think Montgomery said today he'll travel to Toronto, but I mean, I think he's doubtful for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'd have a hard time going to Brazeau in the sense that, and especially in games 3 and 4. And again, I don't know if he's available either. I think the pace of the game in this series might be too fast for him. So that's something. But on the other hand, and it's similar to the conversation we had about Maroon and Reeves the other day, Brazeau does a nice job possessing puck. So if the Bruins were able to create turnovers and you're looking to play in the offensive zone with your defenseman, he does a better job of making plays than Lauko does. So I would think he probably does slot in on that third line if he comes back, because I don't necessarily. I think Lauko and Beecher. Boquist and Beecher have been pretty good throughout the series so far, and I wouldn't want to see them. I wouldn't want to see them come out.
I want to correct something. Brazeau probably is likely more of an option for round 2.
Okay.
Not even in this series. So I think Forbort would be way more of an option in this series, just given off what he said on Monday at practice. So maybe those, but again, you've got what you got, and we'll see what happens with Andrew Peeke. I think that's a big thing. That's a big piece that the Bruins need. They, as I said, they really did miss him when he was out in game 2. I feel like we've hit everything. Have there been things we didn't touch on? And we did a lot on the goaltending. We did the offense. We did the Leafs breaking out of their own zone better. I don't think there's anything that we missed. We talked, chippiness and all that. I mean, I didn't. There were a fair amount of penalties for sure, but I didn't think that made or broke the game. So, again, that's just me. I know a lot of Bruins fans feel that the Bruins got crushed in that sense by the refs. I didn't have that same takeaway. I mean, but you have anything else?
I don't have anything. I think you give credit. I think the one thing would be credit to Sheldon Keefe for making the adjustments that they needed to make and getting his team to play on the road the way they needed to steal a game. And they won the game, and they right, and ball's in their court now, right? 1-1 going back home. They'd take that any day.
They do.
The lights are off in there. Is it getting dark in there for you?
No, I have the lighting, thank God. But then the lights are on kind of down near the rink because they're putting the Celtics court on it. The Celtics play soon, so they're getting that ready for game 2 of that Celtics series. Again, we're always presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Use that promo code CLNS to get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. I don't feel passionately now that the Leafs are going to win. They're definitely in this series. They're a very formidable opponent. I never said they weren't. So again, I don't know. I didn't have a drastic change in this series because again, I think the Bruins will make adjustments for game 3 as we talked about. There wasn't an overwhelming strength in this series so far that I've seen to make me think that either team is an overwhelming favorite to win. I know that's fence sitting, and I hate that. I don't want to end on that, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I've made a little bit of adjustment in the sense that over the course of the last 2 games, today I thought Austin Matthews was the best player that I'd seen in the series in this one game this evening.
Yes, agreed.
They won the game 3-2, and you got literally 0 from Mitch Marner and William Nylander. Like, obviously Nylander's out hurt, but yes. Mitch Marner has given you 0 in the first 2 games. That is not going to happen, and that scares me because this is my own personal belief. I'm a huge Mitch Marner fan, and I think it goes back to previous series against Boston. I like the way he plays. I haven't liked the way he's played in this series to this point. I know that he can be one of the best players in the National Hockey League when his game is right. And that, I think that really scares me, is when he decides that he's going to come out and play. I think I think he's the one difference maker when he has a stick on his puck, what he can do for himself, but what he can do for everyone else around him. I don't think there is someone like him on either, right? Like, I don't think there's someone like that on Boston that every time they touch the puck can make everyone else around them better. That's and when you have one of those in a series, they can tip the balance regardless of what the lineups look like. And so that's the one thing that gives me pause is if they came out 1-1, my expectation would have been that Marner was a big part of the reason why they won a hockey game, and he hasn't been.
And going back to Toronto, you get the favorable matchups, right? So like so far, that Tavares line has mainly been matched up against Grzelcyk and McAvoy and the Zacha line, right? Like that's the line that Marner's on is with John Tavares. Does Sheldon Keefe, when I would assume he would, now try to match that Tavares line to get Marner going up against, Boston's bottom six, right? I know that sounds obvious, but that's clearly something he's probably going to do. And my guess is Marner's going to perform better against those guys. And, I think, if he see, like even tonight, a lot of times, when Grzelcyk was out there, not a lot of times, but sometimes Reeves would jump over the boards or things like that, right? And like dump it in his corner. And like now Toronto has those matchups in their back pocket. So, would I expect Mitch Marner to break out in either game 3 or game 4 or both, because you're going to have those favorable matchups. And I think that does a disservice to the Bruins, obviously, going forward. So, again, 3-2 Bruins lose, Maple Leafs win, series tied at 1. Another fun post-game show. We did an hour. Again. I thought because the game was a loss, I thought we'd do 35, 45 minutes. We just kept going.
It's a lot of fun. And again, I'll always say this. Thank you to the people that tuned in. This is makes a lot of fun to read all those comments in the comment section. Yeah,
it does. There were a lot of comments in favor of you actually on that last video. The video was after the video, people who watched it after, which most people do. So there were a lot of pro you comments. A couple of me, probably like, we like Carl and Evan together, but a lot of like, Carl's great, this and that. So and again, I think that the compliment should be directed at you, not me. So,
so you're saying I got to go back and watch game 1 and look at the compliments on me? All right, I'll do that.
Well, you can just look through the replies. You don't even have to watch the whole thing over again.
I will.
But anyways, that is game 2. Bruins lose. Series tied 1-1. There we go. Right, I like having Carl on. We all like having Carl on. Carl will continue to come on, whether he likes it or not. He will be here. But anyways, that's Carl Corazzini, Evan Marinofsky. We'll catch you after game 3.